In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Happy New Year to everyone. On this occasion, at the end of the year, I wanted to speak about something that maybe is on our minds often, and it's related to healing broken relationships. I was reading actually that toward the end of the year, there's a holiday, or it's not a holiday, but it's like a day of remembrance in New York City on December 28th of every year. And it's called Good Riddance Day. This Good Riddance Day is a day where people bring documents or other memories that happened to them that year that they want to forget about, and they bring it to Times Square in New York City, and they smash it, or they burn it, or they shred it. They do something to it to kind of remember how they want to forget, or they want to forget those memories or those relationships. And sometimes maybe we approach relationships in a similar way. All of us have had difficult relationships or broken relationships with people, maybe this past year, or maybe before that. And the way that we respond to those relationships is very important. Sometimes we imagine that we can do with these relationships the same way as these people do on Good Riddance Day, where we just kind of trash it or smash it or rip it or tear it or shred it, and we just kind of put it behind us, as though that these relationships are never going to affect us again. And we imagine that this is going to be a solution to us. We imagine that this is going to be a solution, that we, tear up these memories and these emotions that we have and we put it behind us, and that everything is going to be fine. But oftentimes there is lingering effects of these relationships. And so instead of trying to forget about them, instead of trying to throw them away or destroy them and try to move on with our lives, maybe we can think about how can we heal them? How can we heal these broken relationships that we have? So I'm going to speak about 5 maybe wrong approaches to how we deal with broken relationships, and then I'm going to speak about 4 good responses or good ways that we can deal with these broken relationships. One wrong way that we would deal with broken relationships is to ignore it. Sometimes we have a broken relationship, or we have a problem with a relationship with someone, and instead of trying to address it, instead of trying to communicate with the person whom we are struggling with, we imagine that it's going to go away by itself. And we try to forget about it. We try to pretend like it's not there. And we try to live our life normally because we really don't want to confront this person with whatever problem that we have, or we feel embarrassed, or we feel like we don't know what to say. We just hope that it's going to go away by itself, so we don't say anything. But what happens is, deep down inside, we begin to develop a type of bitterness and resentment toward this person. Sometimes this person might not even know that what they're doing is harmful or hurting us in some way. And so we begin to develop this kind of a bitterness. And while we imagine that we can endure and we can tolerate it indefinitely, very gradually we reach a breaking point, and we can't stand to be with this person anymore. So we need to have the courage in order to actually stand and to confront the person that we care about. This is actually an act of love. It's an act of love for me to speak to a close person to me and tell them that I'm bothered by them. This is an act of love. This is an act of me wanting to salvage a relationship. This is an act of me wanting to strengthen a relationship. If I really love someone, then I will tell them that I'm upset at them. This is actually an act of love. If I am not going to tell them how I feel, then I've discarded the relationship. Kind of saying, this relationship doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to invest anything in this relationship. I'm just going to ignore the problem, or maybe try to ignore the person altogether. Maybe there's a person who I don't really necessarily have to spend time with. Maybe they're a person not in my household. I don't have to see them all the time. I'm just going to ignore this person altogether. And maybe I'm annoyed with them. I'm bothered by them. I'm offended by them for something that they did. But instead of trying to be open and go and communicate and speak to them, I'm going to try to avoid that person altogether. And I feel that maybe this is a solution. I feel maybe that it always annoys me when I'm with them, so avoiding them feels good. But actually, even when that person is not present in front of me, their memory and the thoughts and the things they say and the things they do gnaw at me, and they bother me, and they make me angry and upset. So anytime we have this feeling towards someone, we shouldn't ignore this. We should actually go after them, and we should try to heal the relationship that's broken. Another way that we deal with broken relationships is that we blame other people. We blame the person on the other end of the broken relationship, and we want to believe that that person is 100% responsible for the brokenness, 100% responsible for the separation, for the pain, for whatever it is that happened that broke the relationship. That person is the one that's responsible. And we can easily point out all of the flaws in that person and point out all the things that they did incorrectly to make the situation, as it were. But nothing is always 100% one-sided. There's always some aspect of the situation, even if it's small, that's my own fault. That's something that I did. Maybe some way that I could have responded better. Actually, in marriage counseling, what happens oftentimes is that the couple, they end up having a fight and an argument, many times about a very small thing, very small. But then as a result of the disagreement, the way that the people begin to attack one another and curse one another and insult one another and say all kinds of horrible things about one another, that actually becomes the issue. That it doesn't even matter what the original issue was. Like, the original issue is something that could be easily fixed, could be easily compromised. But the thing that cannot be fixed is this, very painful and very, very, very bad insults and the way that we respond when we're in anger. So even though maybe one person was to blame for the original problem, maybe the other person was to blame for what happened afterward, for the way that they reacted to the first person, the way that they responded, the words that they said, the things that they did. So there's never anything that's 100% one-sided. We always have something, some part of the problem. And so how is it that we fix this? Well, many times people focus on, how do I fix the other person? They come to Abuna and they say, well, how can I go talk to this person, tell him to do this and this, tell him to change this. And we tell him, go do this, change this. If you change this, everything will be fixed. But unfortunately, we cannot change people. We cannot change them. We can tell them how we feel. We can tell them what we think about what they've done and that we don't like and the experience of dealing with them when they do, whatever it is. But we can't change them. And if we focus all of our energy onto trying to change other people, then we will lose out on something that we can actually do to help the relationship, which is to change ourselves. Because again, we are not 100% blame-free in whatever the situation is. If I focus on myself, I focus on what is it that I can improve and what I can change, then I will actually be helping to improve the relationship. That's something within my control, something that I can actually do. But trying to control and change other people will always fail. There's nothing that I can do. I have to pray actually for this person and give that person whatever means for them to understand themselves. But they're the only ones that can change themselves. They're the only ones that can work toward having seen the problem in themselves, having seen this problem, that they can actually work toward changing it. So blaming other people is not a way to heal a broken relationship. And sometimes in stubbornness, we refuse, and in our pride, we refuse to admit that we have some part to play and that there's something that I need to change in myself, and we continue to point at others, and broken relationships remain for a lifetime because we refuse to address them. We refuse to admit that they are not the only party to blame. Another way, a wrong way, that we can deal with broken relationships is for waiting for an apology. Sometimes we are too proud to be the ones to go and to reconcile. We are too proud to be the ones to go and to offer kind of a handshake or a smile or a hug or some kind of sense that the relationship has not been broken. That I'm coming to you even though you hurt me in something, I still care about a relationship, and I want you to know that there's no hard feelings. I want you to know that I still care about you. I want you to know that I've forgiven you for whatever it is, not because you've come and you've groveled at my feet or bowed down before me or told me how wrong you were or that everything that you did was wrong. No, I'm coming to offer this from my side to you because I want the relationship to be at peace. I want there to be wholeness and unity between us, not separation and brokenness like there is now. Sometimes people will wait for an apology for another person for years, and when they don't receive it, they become more and more and more angry toward them. Sometimes we wait for an apology from a person that doesn't even know that they've offended us, because like in number 1 that we said, we actually haven't gone and talked to them. Sometimes we become offended by someone. and they don't even know that they've offended us. And in our mind, we imagine like this whole scenario, how they, did this on purpose and they're trying to hurt us and they didn't even come and apologize afterward. And now, they have it again against us and they become our enemy and we become so angry with them. And all this time, this person is completely clueless as to what's happening. So we shouldn't go wait for an apology. We should go and we should speak to them, and we should be the one to initiate reconciliation. Initiating reconciliation is the best thing that we can do. And this should not be something that is difficult for us. This should be something natural, because the sense of brokenness in a relationship, the sense of division and pain that comes from this brokenness far exceeds the pain of swallowing our pride to go and actually talk to someone and say, hey, I want to continue our friendship. I want our relationship to be better. Let's, make up. Let's apologize. I'll apologize to you first. Let's just get everything on the table and not make a big deal of it. Let's just put it all on the table and let's, move forward. Another wrong way that we can deal with broken relationships is to retaliate. Sometimes when we're very angry, because of something someone has done to us, our whole way of thinking is that I want to retaliate. I want to return whatever it is that they did to me. I want to do it to them. And sometimes we do this in a very active way, which maybe is not as often. So, someone can go and like slash someone's tires or, something like that. That's maybe very overt. But actually, maybe more often than not, we do it in a passive way. We do it in a way where we want to make that person feel uncomfortable. We want to hurt that person in some way that's not very obvious, because that way we feel like we're taking the higher ground. We feel like, from the outside, nobody thinks that I'm actually taking revenge. Nobody thinks that I'm doing anything wrong. I'm just kind of sticking it to this person in ways that maybe only they will understand, so that they would continually get the message that I'm upset and I'm angry at them. And again, when we retaliate, our whole focus is not on reconciliation. Our whole focus is on, how do I make this person feel pain the way that they made me to feel pain? And when this is my focus, I will find all kinds of ways. And unfortunately, there will be retaliation back. And this kind of builds on it. It becomes kind of this animosity where I will retaliate for something a person did to me, and then that person will retaliate back, and then I'll retaliate back. And it ends up escalating until it becomes a war. Right? And this is like the worst kind of brokenness, because it's not just brokenness, but it's brokenness that's compounded with additional things on top of it. This is when it's very, very hard to kind of wipe the slate clean and to restore the relationship again. So this is something we definitely should not do. And one way to help us not to retaliate is that we don't respond in our anger right away. Whatever situation makes us to feel angry, makes us feel we want to retaliate, we just kind of put in our minds, I am insane right now in my moment of anger, and I should not send any emails, I should not send any text messages, I should not make any phone calls, I shouldn't do anything. I'm going to isolate myself in a room until I calm down, and when I calm down, then I will think more clearly, what is it that I should do? How is it that I should respond to this situation? But almost inevitably, every time, whenever we respond to someone in our anger, we're going to say something or do something that later on we're going to regret. So to help us not to retaliate, we should wait and have patience, calm down first. The fifth way that we might respond to broken relationships, and I'm not saying that this is always wrong, because there are certain situations where this is necessary, but one way that we respond is to leave. And to leave the relationship is something that, like I said, can happen, we might need to happen, but oftentimes we resort to this far too quickly than we need to. The idea of friendship is that we sacrifice for one another, and sacrifice is painful. Sometimes we need to bear one another's burdens. When Christ says we need to bear one another's burdens, how is it that we bear this burden? Sometimes the burden that I bear with people is I bear the burden of their personality. Maybe a person has a troubled personality. Maybe the person is a difficult person because of a way that they were raised, or something that they were lacking in their childhood, or whatever the case might be, some difficult situation that they face. So how is it that I befriend such a person? To bear that person, to bear their burden, means that I'm going to bear and tolerate with maybe some difficulty of theirs, maybe some personality characteristic or attribute that is painful, maybe not ideal, maybe something that I'm going to kind of put up with for the sake of love to them. And so that means that when someone hurts me in a relationship, the first response I have cannot be, okay, well, I'm ending the relationship. The first time that somebody does something to bother me in the relationship, what kind of relationship is this? There will be no depth actually in the relationship. Depth in relationships are built through struggle. They're built through common experience and painful experiences that we share together. Actually in marriage, one of the things that strengthens marriage is going through conflict together, repeatedly, time after time after time, and how we resolve conflict with one another. The solution cannot be from the first time that a married couple has conflict that we're going to divorce, we're going to separate. It can't be the case. It's something that we have to struggle in and fight in for a long period of time. And for those who are successful in it, they find that the relationships deepen because we've been through so much together. We understand how to deal with one another in a better way. So when it comes to broken relationships, as much as we can, leaving the relationship should be the last option. Okay, so what is it that we should do? What is it that we should do in relationships? The first thing that we should do is communicate when we have broken relationships. Instead of ignoring, we need to communicate. And communication is something that needs to be ongoing. I can't wait until the moment where my relationship is broken and then say, okay, now is the time to communicate. Actually, if we don't know how to communicate with one another on a regular basis, then we will not know how to communicate whenever there's a stressful situation. Actually, when there's a stressful situation between me and another person, that makes it automatically more difficult to communicate with them because we're stressed and we're emotional and we don't know what to say, and it's very easy for me to say something offensive to them because I'm angry at them. So we have to learn to communicate with one another and have this kind of channel of communication open all the time from before there's any conflict. This is why communication is so important. We have to always be communicating. We always have to be sharing. We also be telling each other how we feel and what's happening and why this is happening. So communication is very important. So when there is a conflict, what is it that I do? And I go and I tell this person, this is how I feel. The way that you acted made me feel this way. And it's important that we don't say to the person, we don't accuse the person. There's a difference between accusing the person of something versus telling them how we felt as a result of their action. It sends a different message. For instance, the difference between going to someone and saying, when you said this statement, I felt sad or I felt angry. Okay, that's different than saying, you need to stop saying this because you're so offensive. Okay, the person is going to hear it in a different way. In one case, you're accusing me of something. In one case, you're calling me an offensive person. This is something that's going to raise my defenses. Okay, I'm going to, when I defend myself, it's like, no, I'm not an offensive person. But the other way, all I'm saying is, when you said something, this is the way I felt. Then I can't contradict this. Okay, if you're telling me this is how you felt, what can I say? Okay, this is how you felt. If that's going to maybe cause me to think, it's like, well, if the way that I speak makes you upset, then maybe I should change something about the way that I speak. Not because you've accused me of anything, but simply because you shared with me how is it that you feel. So the way that we communicate is very important, and that we should be communicating all the time. Another thing that we need to do is we need to take responsibility. Okay, take responsibility of what it is that is our part. One thing that happens in the new year is everyone has this kind of mindset is out with the old, in with the new. And people also have that mentality sometimes toward relationships, is that, oh, I'm just going to discard this relationship that I have that's not working, and then I'm going to get a new relationship, and that relationship will work fine. And many people do this even with marriage relationships. People get married multiple times because they imagine that there was something wrong with the previous marriage, and so I'll, get rid of this spouse, and I will get a new spouse, and then this relationship actually will be fine. But many times we find that this doesn't work. And the reason is because I myself am a part of the problem, right? So we go back to the idea of, am I taking responsibility for my part or not? If I am part of the problem and I don't resolve this problem that's in me, then in any relationship that I go into, I will instigate problems with other people. Sometimes you'll find that there are certain people that have difficult personalities that in any time they get into a relationship with anyone, any kind of relationship, there ends up being tension and stress and difficulties and arguments and fights. And then this person might think that everyone around them is difficult. This person thinks that how come everyone just, everyone is foolish, everyone doesn't do the right thing. When in fact, they are the ones that have the problem. They're the ones that are instigating the response of other people, negative responses, because of their actions, because of their attitude, because of their words, because of the things that they are doing. So this is why we have to be honest with ourselves, and we ask ourselves, is the way that I speak, is the way that I act, is the way that I think, is the way that I am engaging with other people, is this part of the problem of why I have broken relationships? Am I unreasonable in my expectations? Am I unreasonable in my requests? Am I unreasonable in whatever it is that's causing other people to want to push away from me, from wanting to distance themselves from me, that causes brokenness? Every person should ask, actually, if every person asked this question about themselves, then it would heal all the relationships in the world. Because everyone would focus on something that is within their control, which is themselves. I can control myself. I can't control anyone else. The third thing we should do is we should initiate reconciliation. Like we said, instead of waiting for an apology, we should initiate reconciliation. This shows that we care about the other person. Okay? One thing that people are concerned about with initiating reconciliation is they're concerned that if I initiate reconciliation, this is kind of an admission that I was wrong. And people say, you know what, the other person was wrong. I don't want to initiate reconciliation because they're the ones that's wrong and they're the ones that need to come to me first. Initiating reconciliation has nothing to do with whether we're wrong or right. Initiating reconciliation means we care about the relationship, and that even if the other person is wrong, I still care about the relationship. I still don't want the relationship to be broken, and I want to restore it again. And even though you did what is wrong, I still care about you. And even though you did what is wrong, I want to be reconciled to you. I want our friendship to continue. I want our relationship to continue, whatever the relationship might be. So initiating reconciliation has nothing to do with being right or wrong. It's actually something that we should be doing to everyone all the time because we care about other people. The fourth way that we can respond positively for broken relationships is that we should forgive. Instead of retaliation, we should forgive. My role is to forgive, just as God has forgiven us. This is what we say in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our trespasses as we have forgiven those who trespass against us. Forgiving other people is difficult. Forgiving other people has nothing to do with whether they apologize. Forgiving other people has nothing to do with whether they were justified or unjustified. Forgiving other people is completely about the fact that I am a sinner and I am in need of the mercy of God. And just as I am in need of the mercy of God, I have to show mercy to other people. This is it. There's nothing else. It has nothing to do with what they did. It has nothing to do with how horrible it was. It has nothing to do with whether I have that same weakness or not. It has nothing to do whether I can understand why they did it or not. It's simply based on the fact that I am a sinner and I'm in need of the mercy of God. And so I want the mercy of God on me, so I have to show mercy to other people. This is what it's about. So God asks us to forgive one another. And when he asks us to forgive, again, he doesn't say that forgiveness means that what they did to us was not wrong. No, we can forgive, and at the same time, we can hate what they did to us. We can forgive and at the same time acknowledge that what they did was wrong. That has nothing to do with forgiveness. Just as God, when he forgives us, he doesn't forgive us and say, oh, and everything you did was great. Everything you did was good. No, he doesn't say that. He says, you are a sinner and what you did was wrong, but I'm going to have mercy on you and I'm going to forgive you your sins. So this is how we should forgive one another. That we are all weak and that we are all sinful and that we all are in need of mercy. And so we have mercy also on one another. And just as God has mercy on us and forgives us and reconciles us to himself, as much as it is in our ability, we should also be reconciled to our neighbor. The last point I want to speak about positive responses, positive ways to deal with broken relationships, is that we should have patience. Very often relationships do not break overnight. Very often relationships break over a very long period of time, over a series of years, because of negative interactions that happen between people that gradually build up until they reach a breaking point. So in the same way, because this is the case, reconciliation also does not happen overnight. Reconciliation can take a long period of time. And so this is why we need to have patience. We should not expect necessarily that our first attempt at reconciliation is going to be successful. We shouldn't imagine that the first time that I try to communicate to someone about the way that I feel about some action that they're doing that's hurting me is going to be successful. We need to continue all throughout and working on the relationship. It's a process. And this is again why sometimes ending the relationship seems like it's going to be the fastest way. I try once, I try twice, I try 3 times, I try 10 times, it hasn't worked, okay, I'm out of the relationship. Again, there are some situations where that's the only way. There's some situations where there is no other option than to do that. But there are many situations where we don't have to do that, where maybe because we're just so annoyed and so bothered that we choose to do that, or we don't believe that there could be anything good that could come from this relationship again, but that God asks us to have patience. Look how much patience God has with us, that after an entire lifetime of sinning against God, He still waits for us, He still knocks at our door, He still asks us to open the door for Him so He could come and dine with us. So we should have patience in our broken relationships. The healing does not happen immediately, it takes time. So in conclusion, there seems to be 2 things that are true about the human condition. One is that we always need forgiveness, and the other one is that we always have someone that we need to forgive. So we should really think about, who is it in my life, maybe this past year, that I have a broken relationship with, and who is it that I can restore the relationship again according to my ability. And glory be to God forever. Amen.